Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Rotoworld Football Show on Thursday, March 6th. Free agency and legal tampering is nigh. I am Patrick Daugherty, joined today by Denny Carter and Kyle Dvorchak. We are going to preview free agency, some of the top names available at all the skill positions, except for tight end, which we're not going to talk about.
Oh, come on.
Sorry, Denny, that you wrote about tight end. I was reading Denny's article this morning. Denny and I put out a free agency primer where we break down the entire landscape of quarterback, running back, receiver, and tight end. I genuinely did not know who you were even going to write about for tight end.
I wrote about 14.
You did. And the conk daddies in there. Kyle, real quick too, you have an article on free agency also, right? Or one free agent for every single team, I believe.
Yeah, it's every team's top free agent. And that's the reason that I know that cannot be a good tight end class. And that Denny, please God, be joking about the 14 tight end number. Because among 32 teams, I almost know for sure I did not write a single team's most important free agent was a tight end. And I don't remember even considering one. So the fact that you, even joking, if you doubled the number from 7 and it was a joke to go to 14, who are these mythical tight ends that you speak of?
Tommy Tremble, ever heard of him?
Well, yeah, heard of the conk daddy. 14, I don't think he did. 14, again, I will say, I think you did 14 receivers where I was like, man, where are all these guys coming from? Surely he's out of dudes, and he's not.
No, I could have done more.
Tutu got $10
you
million.
It is like a deep free agent receiver class. It's not a good.
I had to cut 580 words on DJ Chark.
So we're going to talk about some names like Sam Darnold, Javonte Williams, Nick Chubb, DK Dobbins, Amari Cooper, Steph Diggs. We're going to lead the show with DK Metcalf requesting a trade, though. Christian Kirk and Tyler Lockett both joining the free agent receiver market. To start, Denny said something very objectionable.
No, Denny. He didn't. No.
What happened, Denny? Tell us. Share your yarn.
I wanted to just, relay this little thing that happened while I'm working at home today. So I had golf on ESPN Plus, only because it was not on NBC. No way to watch NBC, so ESPN Plus. And the tournament, the broadcast was over, so it cuts off, and it instantly goes to something else. So I'm downstairs, and I hear the sounds of what I would describe as baseball on the TV, and I thought, what?
You let the dulcet tones wash over you then, and got interested?
Why would this be happening? And then it registers. Oh my! There's a spring training game on the kitchen TV. So I sprinted upstairs, ran to the control, and immediately turned off the TV because I can't deal with watching spring baseball when it's 28 degrees outside. I just can't.
Denny, by the way, that's what's known as a humble brag that you have a smart TV in your kitchen. You have ESPN Plus in your kitchen.
Yes.
You have a golf course in your backyard. You have the world's largest
house big enough to have multiple rooms because you ran from one room to the other room.
You have a smart television in your kitchen. In my house, that's known as laptop territory. Like, all right, I'll pull up Peacock so I can watch Aston Villa.
Oh, what are you, a Zoomer?
Yeah. I know. I'm the last person left who has a computer. No one else has a computer anymore. The last laptop sold was in 2016, and it was to me.
I'm just saying I would never watch anything on a laptop.
Well, listen, some of us don't have smart TVs in our kitchen. You probably have a smart TV like on your fridge. You probably have several smart TVs in your kitchen as well.
Well, I have one of those TVs embedded, in the ice maker.
By the way, there was a very charming moment. Speaking of baseball and speaking of ESPN, where they were showing a Phillies and I believe Tigers game yesterday, and they were interviewing the Phillies manager mid-innings. Spring training, nothing matters. Even though ESPN also does that during the playoffs. Nothing matters. They have an in-game interview going, and while Rob Thompson is speaking, pitcher Jesus Luzardo allowed a home run on 3 consecutive pitches, and he just sat there in stunned silence.
Wow.
It's actually a really good clip, worth checking out. It's very low stakes in spring training. It's hard for anything to be upsetting. And Jesus Luzardo, 3 straight pitches, gets taken yard. The first one was one of the worst pitches I've ever seen.
Is baseball metrics, is that bad for baseball metrics?
That's bad in baseball, and it's also bad for baseball. We can't have this happening, ruining our beautiful game. Tell you what the Seahawks can't have happening, apparently, is DK Metcalf remaining on the team. The Seahawks, they went from 2 years in a row to like, man, they have too many receivers. how do we sort this out? How do we parcel this out? Tyler Lockett gone. We'll get to that in a second. DK Metcalf wants to be gone, heading into the final year of his contract, evidently not pleased with what has been presented to him in extension talks. He's requested a trade. I'm letting him explore a trade. It seems like the kind of situation where he might not actually get traded. It might not make sense for Seattle. But Denny, here's what I'll put to you on DK Metcalf. He's a totally different player than like an Amari Cooper. But to me, he's always been similar to Amari Cooper in that it just never quite feels like it's all adding up, or it just feels like it should be a little more. And is he miscast as a true number one receiver, DK Metcalf? To me, I feel like he can be a number one receiver, but he's not a role player, but he'd be best off to me as a number two receiver who's had like the very set role of just dominating on the boundary. But what is your take on DK Metcalf as he apparently tries to explore greener pastures?
So I don't think that he is a clear-cut wide receiver one in the modern NFL because he just doesn't fit that type, right? I mean, he's very old school in the way he's built and the way he plays. So I would say no, but also the numbers agree with me, which is always nice. I looked at EPA per target for wide receivers since the beginning of the 2023 season, and it's not great. Not great for DK Metcalf. He is in line with guys like Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley. And let me check my notes here. Yes, Tyler Lockett.
Oh.
So it's bad. It's bad.
Denny, I had just like some basic stat screeners of like targets per route run and yards per route run. Christian Kirk came up too. And they're so different stylistically and physically, obviously. But like what they bring to your offense, I think DK Metcalf's better. But to your point of like, I don't think this guy is built to be a number one. And we've kind of see that play out over years. That's more true of Christian Kirk. But I think it's true of both of them, where I think Metcalf would benefit from being in a T. Higgins type situation where the team is good at passing, but they don't have to run the offense through you. And I just thought it's funny that Christian Kirk came up as like, yeah, he's like in that same neighborhood of like, he's a good number two. Like I said, I think Metcalf's a little better. He is better, but it's just, he would be miscast. And both of them kind of have been as the number one.
I feel like that's what makes it frustrating. I think everything you guys said is basically right. And that clearly there's like they're at loggerheads about payment is obviously what it always comes down to. But this almost is the exact right situation for him to thrive in. At this point where you have JSN finally emerging, kind of can do damage at every level of the field. He can be the movable chess piece who's always drawing defensive attention. Not DK Metcalf draws a lot of defensive attention too. For different reasons, because you cannot let him get over the top of the defense. But I feel like this could be the beginning of like a beautiful partnership between DK Metcalf and JSN. But you can see why Seattle is like hesitant to pay the money. I think they should just pony up and do it though, because you might view it as a luxury. Like, why should we have a super highly paid number two receiver? But I feel like that's a good spot on the roster for you to have a luxurious purchase as your number two receiver. And Denny, right back when like players had nicknames like Bullet Bob, then DK Metcalf would have been a number one.
Like a clear, no matter
exactly. The clearest number, all-decade team in the 70s, DK Metcalf. Now, he really is. He's like in the T. Higgins mold, except for he actually plays. And I feel like it would be leaving such a good situation for him. There's places where he could upgrade. But I actually do not want DK Metcalf to leave Seattle.
I don't either. I don't either. I mean, he gets lots of opportunities. If you look at total air yards among receivers since the beginning of 2023, he's eighth. He's ahead of guys like Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson somehow. Yeah, I mean, he gets a lot of opportunity. Converting those air yards into real yards has not been particularly his specialty for some reason.
Yeah, he's a classic. The whole is never quite as great as the sum of his parts. Like, there's just always something a little missing from
I'm glad you had to say that, because I couldn't.
Did I say it correctly? I don't know. I mentioned this with Chris Harris the other day. I was on the Chris Harris podcast, harrisfootball.com. And it is an interesting, probably negative indicator for DK Metcalf that something you and I always joke about, Denny, and boy, does Geno Smith love to yell at DK Metcalf.
I mean, I bet that's why he wants out. Like, I'm not being humiliated again all season by Geno Smith.
But maybe it's because he actually is messing up, and Geno Geno probably should not upbraid him the way he does.
No, I don't.
Every snap, like DK scores a 77-yard touchdown and Geno screams like in his face.
Geno's running down the field with his helmet off, yelling at him. Like he's getting a 15-yard penalty over yelling at. By the way, JSN is going to end up being Will Smith in an empty room soon with both Lockett and Metcalf gone. Poor JSN.
That's how we like it. 175 targets.
I mean,
Poor
rich
JSN. And real quick, we can move on from DK Metcalf. Have you thought of any potential fits where if he's not in Seattle, where do we want DK? I mean, it's always the usual suspects. The same teams always need a receiver somehow.
I feel like he would cook in Buffalo.
They're not Keon Coleman. They already have this generation's DK Metcalf and Keon Coleman.
Good.
Listen, each successive generation gets worse. So obviously Keon Coleman is a lot worse. He's this generation's no good, but
What?
Yeah.
I think, Pat, to your point about like it's kind of easy to throw out the same landing spots, but that's kind of also the point is that every move that is made in the NFL, every time the transaction wire scrolls and it's not New England Patriots have traded for wide receiver, I'm like, well, this one's next then. It's got to be the next one. It's like, oh no, we signed an RFA guy. And it like the Patriots are not going to go into 2025 with this receiver room. But even if they do address it in the draft, they have no viable receivers on that roster right now. Like maybe I think it's probably fair to say Pop Douglas is a good like wide receiver 3-4 for
he should be a 4. He should be a 4.
Yeah. And after that, they have nothing. And like the tight end room, Hunter Henry should be like a rotational tight end 1.
Oh, come on.
Like
he could be a good fit for the Patriots too, where if they're going to run like a conservative Mike Vrabel type offense, he could be like when they do the play action shots down the field.
I was thinking
DK could be roaming free. Pittsburgh is a really objectionable potential fit that'll probably be on him. He seems a lot like a Dallas Cowboys type player. I don't know
the
if
one
really
that the connection has been made 100 times is the Chargers. This was, I believe, Fox's Jordan Schultz pointed out that the Chargers aggressively pursued him last offseason. Obviously didn't land him. And we know they've upgraded the receiver room since with Quentin Johnson he's not like still not probably worth the first round pick they spent, but really did take a meaningful step last year. And obviously Ladd looking like one of the next superstar receivers that we got. But like, that's kind of what we talked about is that maybe you want sort of in the same way that JSN could actually be a good foil to DK Metcalf, Ladd can be a good foil to DK Metcalf. And that one, the connection has been there for a year or more.
I'm in on this Cowboys idea, Pat. Let's get that trending.
We really should get that trending. It would be amazing. The Chargers honestly would be a good fit too, but DK opposite CeeDee Lamb would be.
I mean, that's perfect because DK would not have to be the wide receiver 1, obviously. And it would take some pressure off of Lamb. It would give Dak Prescott another guy to target when teams like gravitate towards CeeDee Lamb. That'd be a great fit, I think.
I would love that. Probably the Cowboys seem like they're not in position to make that kind of splash move this offseason.
They're never in position.
The Cowboys, I'll tell you who the Cowboys will be in on is Christian Kirk and Tyler Lockett.
Yeah.
Both released. I don't know if we have a ton to say on Kirk and Lockett. I mean, Lockett he's not in danger of falling out of the league. He's going to get a contract, but it could be his last year in the league. Christian Kirk, another guy, just can't, whatever theoretical ceiling he had, he's not going to reach it. Do either of you have any strong feelings on either of these players? Christian Kirk, of course, I guess being the hotter commodity. Who wants to go first? Kyle Dvorchak, Denny went first last time, so you go this time.
Lockett, I really no interest. He was like outside the top 80 receivers in yards per route run. He's been trending down for years.
You say top 80?
80.
Yeah. Yes.
80.
Yep. That was last year, and I believe what was his age 33 going into 34 season?
And it's over.
Yeah, it does feel like we've been talking about a lot of guys who should be rotational players. I do think at this point, like you bring him in to be an occasional speed threat kind of guy if he's still got that speed to him. But I don't know if you want to even run him a full complement of routes, given how little he gives you on a per route basis. Christian Kirk is fine. Like I mentioned him in the same breath as DK Metcalf, who is trying to get $30 million a year, supposedly. So I don't think he's quite on that level, but I do think maybe this sort of goes to the evidence that like Christian Kirk can be underrated as your wide receiver 2/3, and DK Metcalf might be overrated as your wide receiver 1. But with that being said, I do think there's even like a more physically limited ceiling with Kirk, obviously just the way these guys are built, and the fact that we've seen a higher ceiling, albeit just in 1 year with DK Metcalf. So I think I'd be fine if like my quote favorite team, I don't care about your favorite football team to be clear, but if I did have a favorite team, if they signed Kirk to like a 2-year deal.
But Lockett, I don't hate as like he could be. I feel like he could revive a bit as a rotational 3-4, like a guy just trying to make some splash plays, has some sure hands. Denny, but Kirk, obviously, he's the guy who's going to have interest in all that. As Kyle just laid out, do you have any Kirk thoughts? I feel like I had asked you about Kirk before, but I don't think I have.
Targeted on 23.5% of his routes last year. That's not hateful. I mean, it says that
Denny speaking like a Zoomer all of a sudden, but we'll allow it.
That's a vibe, you know.
Yeah.
God, I would never think to say that. So he's vibe maxing, you know, and so I think that he can be a wide receiver too on a certain team. I kind of like.
Nah, he can't, but that's fine.
No. He does.
He couldn't even be the wide receiver 2 on the friggin' Jaguars, man.
Hear me out. He could easily be the wide receiver 2 with either New York team.
Man, who cares?
Well, I'm just saying you're wrong.
Look, I mean,
I think
a team that doesn't matter at all, then he could be the number 2. Maybe.
I mean,
frankly, that's what he's been doing with the Jags for a while. Is like, okay, team that doesn't matter. I guess you can have 1,100 yards on that team.
True. 1,100 yards. He's like 30. I think he's had over 800 yards like one time.
Yeah.
I think it was 1,100 though. I think he got to 1,100.
He did. It was the first Jags year. That's when like, oh, guess what? He's not such a bad signing now, is he? Huh?
No, he's still terrible signing. Really, truly.
As evidenced by the fact that they cut him when they first could.
Oh, we
I think in Zoomer parlance, you would just say he's giving wide receiver 3. That's just where the sentence ends there. He's giving wide receiver 3.
Kirk, right. The problem with Kirk, it's always been the same problem his entire career, where he's really kind of more like a middle of the field slot guy, but he always tempts teams to use him deep somehow. And there's just never not an identity crisis with Christian Kirk, and where he's not quite good enough at either role. And teams, he's just a tweener. He actually is just kind of a tweener.
Yeah.
And where he's not a bad NFL player, but he's a tweener, and it seems like no one can decide how to use him. Maybe a little better luck with coaching staff number 3. He's never been on like an amazing team. So maybe if the right team gets Christian Kirk, he does revive. Real quick, Denny.
Real quick. Tyler Lockett, you claim he's washed. You claim he's bad. And if you can't tell, we recently got access to True Media. So I'm going to have a lot of EPA stuff.
Oh, yeah. I need to get in on that.
We got to take that stuff away from Denny. He's using it for evil.
This is evil. Tyler Lockett last year, the same EPA per target as your precious Marvin Harrison Jr. So I'm just saying.
I don't even know if that's good or not.
I gotta find that True Media email, but I was there when this went down, but I have not looked very powerfully into the email since it went down. I am looking very powerfully into taking a short break. We'll be right back after this. Scotty Scheffler headlines a loaded field this week at the Arnold Palmer Invitational. Tune to NBC and Peacock to find out if Scheffler can win his 3rd crown in the last 4 years at Bay Hill. Very curious, Denny. The Bay Hill tournament, turns out it is on NBC. And yet you're watching the parts that don't even matter on ESPN.
Yeah, I mean, the early sicko stuff is on ESPN Plus, and then it goes to Golf Channel. It's rightful home. And then it goes to NBC on the weekend. By the way, Scotty Scheffler, I don't know. This guy, he had a kid recently. Maybe he's not getting a lot of sleep. My man is temperamental on the course, right? Really? These days. Oh yeah. He's always been very cool and calm. Not so much this year. I'm wondering if he's getting sufficient. I'm wondering if he's getting his 8 hours.
He's about to join Live, or he's already like pre-self-loathing for joining Live. He's in his John Rahm era.
No way. I refuse to even acknowledge.
He's in his John Rahm.
Denny, am I really bad at DFS? Denny, am I really bad at DFS, or is this course hard? Because I'm seeing a lot of guys over par.
No, you're not bad. The wind is gusting like nobody's business. Like guys are like triple bogeying holes. It's crazy.
A lot of them are. I can name 6 of them if I had to.
Denny, where's Bay Hill, by the way?
It's in Orlando, and it's cold and windy, and these guys look like they're in hell.
This has been the same system. Did anyone else experience this system? I guess not. I guess it didn't hit Maryland. That blew through the center of the country the past 2 days, where we had like sustained 30-mile-an-hour winds yesterday, and it was like being on the surface of the moon. What's going on? Like, can we just have one nice day of weather ever?
God.
And the answer is, of course, no. Can Sam Darnold have one full season ever? He was so close to putting it all together in 2024 until the 2 most important games of the season where he looked like what did he look like? Very, very
Sam
bad.
Darnold, unfortunately.
He looked like Sam Darnold is what he looked like, where that was the tenor of my free agent write-up on Sam Darnold, where it appeared that he had finally answered the question, is Sam Darnold good? And then instead, somehow in the final 2 games, he just confused the situation further. We know that Sam Darnold at least has a baseline now, and he's raised whatever baseline he had. Clearly, the Vikings not a big believer in the ceiling by the fact that they moved on, despite that really solid season. Sam, he's a classic guy where he needs to be maximized. He's not the supporting cast elevator. He needs to be elevated by the supporting cast. It's going to be very difficult for him to find a better supporting cast than Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Kevin O'Connell. So there's like a lot of risk here with this situation, Denny. But with him probably not going back to Minnesota unless his value just craters. What do you think the best fit for Sam Darnold is?
It's really tough to name a team because, like you said, you don't fit that mold. Like you can't fit that mold. You can't say, well, he would be in this Viking situation in this location or that location. I do want to emphasize that Darnold, I actually did some looking into it strongly before the show. If you strip out the final 2 games where he was a disaster,
you throw away the bad games.
Yeah,
but I mean, you're talking about
the only 2 games that mattered.
You're talking about 16 games. Only Joe Burrow and Jalen Hurts had a higher completion rate over expected.
So what happens if he had any other 2 games? It's probably not that bad. It's only 2 games.
It actually probably isn't that much.
Right. No, it plunges down to 57th. No,
I almost believed that.
So I just refuse to believe that Darnold will succeed anywhere outside of Minnesota. But I would say the Raiders would be.
Well, yes. Okay. I'm glad you said the Raiders, and I'm glad it's time to cut him off. Because Kyle, I'll throw this one to you then. I feel like as Denny said, like the perfect Shanny, the perfect McVay landing spot is not going to materialize, it appears, this offseason.
Yeah.
And I honestly don't think the Raiders are the worst possible fit, even though it's Chip Kelly. I don't even think the Steelers would be the worst possible fit. Because one thing people forget about the Darnold descent is that it did begin in Carolina that half season, I guess 2022, where they went like just face-meltingly run heavy in the second half of the season. And that's when he started like fooling the computers. Like Darnold's EPA is like top 10 somehow, even though like that, they like never won a game really. But he started tricking the computers in 2022. The Vikings tried to be balanced last year, but still was ultimately pass heavy. I think if he gets in like a traditional Pete Carroll system or the dreaded Arthur Smith system, where they're hell bent on balance or being even run heavy, that could be where he kind of becomes almost like a deluxe Ryan Tannehill. He's like a choose your spots, deep ball guy. He has good accuracy when he does pass, but he's just clearly the kind of player that cannot be overexposed. What do you think of my take about Darnold to the Raiders or the Steelers?
Yeah, I had those two as, I guess, among the better spots. But like you said, no one has the complete package like the Vikings. Because the thing is, the Vikings are one of the best coach offenses in the NFL. I don't know, top 5 or whatever you want to call it, top 10 even. I don't know for sure. I mean, we definitely don't have that in Arthur Smith's offense. And TBD on Chip Kelly's offense, I'm a little optimistic. But again, you can't pencil him in as being as good as Kevin O'Connell at designing an offense. And then you line up the weapons, and the weapons in either of those spots are just nothing resembling what you have in Minnesota. So I think the Raiders are probably the best one. I think they're the one that's most likely to succeed in that semi-hide the quarterback style, or at least obscure where the quarterback is. Are we going to throw this play? Are we not going to? And when we do, is it a high leverage spot? And is it a spot that we have schemed up something open? That was the run pass style that Arthur Smith had. It fizzled out when he took it to Atlanta, and quarterback play muddles whether it was even successful or not in Pittsburgh. But I do think that the Chip Kelly team is probably just better adept at executing that. I'm again just guessing because we haven't seen him yet. I think there are some few like sneaky bad landing spots. I know Cleveland's one that's been tossed out a lot, but like, and I think Kevin Stefanski is a very good coach, but like, what did he get out of Joe Flacco? And what did he get out of Jameis Winston? Tons and tons of volume. What have we just been reiterating that we don't think is good for Sam Darnold? I don't know. I'll see you in 45 pass attempts, Jameis. Like, that is not what you want to do with Sam Darnold. You don't want to say
45 pass attempts with Sam Darnold's a minimum of 5 sacks, probably 7 to 8.
Yeah, it really is. So, although I think Stefanski is good at his job, he hasn't played hide the quarterback. Frankly, played it the most with Deshaun Watson, and he just kind of let his. I mean, maybe it was just because that's who they are. That's who Joe Flacco was at that point in his career. That's who Jameis Winston was. But like, he was just fine exposing those guys, and sometimes it worked, like with Joe Flacco, and sometimes it didn't work, like how it ended with Joe Flacco, and it like honestly didn't work that much with Jameis, other than like fun counting stats. So. I think that's a kind of a landmine one. Titans is pretty bad. They just don't run the most creative offense, and they're not like loaded with talent. Yeah, it's the Raiders, but it's still not even that good of a spot.
I think it's the Raiders. I think the runner-up has to be the Steelers because for political reasons, it's not going to be the Jets. You can't bring them back after.
I had that one as like, can we put politics aside? But they can't. No, you can't. But that's the one where that has the best wide receiver of like all the teams we just named in Garrett Wilson. And it potentially has the best coach in Tanner Engstrand, who was the passing game coordinator for the Lions, came over as now the team's OC. But like you said, it's just that's not how the powers that be will let this thing work out.
Any other quarterbacks in this class we have anything to say about? It's Aaron Rodgers, it's Justin Fields, it's Russell Wilson, it's Daniel Jones, it's Jameis Winston, Joe Flacco, Gardner Minshew, Cooper Rush. It's never a good crop. It's particularly just not great crop this year. It's actually, there's some depth. Like even Cooper Rush like won some games. There's a lot of potential like number 2 bridge quarterbacks, Denny. Anyone else we care about from this group behind Sam Darnold?
I mean, as for Fields, I may have mentioned this on Tuesday. I will follow him to the ends of the earth. And so wherever he goes, however he ends up, I will be drafting him and we will be enjoying our rushing production. So beyond that, the only thing I could say is Gardner Minshew obviously is going to start 12 games for somebody this year.
Unless he gets usurped by the new Gardner Minshew, Cooper Rush.
I had on Fields one thing that's like, I think interesting but frustrating for fantasy is that when he's at his best, which was really last year, he's another guy who really needs his reps manicured. Mm-hmm. But when he's at his best for fantasy is when he drops back 45 times, because I don't lose a dang point for sacks. I lose 1 point for interceptions. And he is so much better at scrambling than he is at design runs. He's like top 5 in yards after contact and missed tackles force and overall yards per carry and explosive rate on scrambles specifically. On design runs, it's not that he's bad. He just hangs in that top 10 to top 15 range because I think part of his like natural given abilities is that when a defense is spread out by a drop back, he carves them up. That's what made him so enticing in Chicago. It didn't necessarily make him good, but it made it so fun for that 1 year. And that's why it wasn't nearly as fun this time around with Pittsburgh. He had some good rushing games. He had a bunch of he had, I think, 2 multi-touchdown games. But ultimately, like the key to his fantasy ceiling is the key to him getting benched, that's the Justin Fields enigma.
Fields too. I would like it. Not, I guess. What more could the Steelers have really done with Justin Fields? You can't really say they necessarily did a bad job. I would like to see him with a different coaching staff, like a talent maximizing coach. He's never been a part, at least of a fantasy friendly coaching staff. So I would like that for Justin Fields. But as Denny knows, all I say every show is Taysom Fields. Taysom Fields. Come on, it's time for Taysom Fields.
Oh man, can I just real quick share something that Pat's gonna hate from True Media?
Yes. Oh, I was gonna let you first, but I'm in.
Here, take away his subscription, please.
No. Never. I spent
a lot shoot, we actually weren't supposed to have that, Denny.
All right. Taysom Hill, 4th best EPA per designed rush last year.
Well, yeah, because all he does is run and have it. How does he even get an EPA when he doesn't attempt passes?
Well, I mean, it's just rushing EPA. Is what it is.
I know. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Just behind Lamar Jackson. Curious.
Very curious. I'm rattled and flustered. We're moving on now to the running backs. And listen, last year was the year of the free agent running back. Not only were there big names in Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry, there were big names that paid off and took their teams on deep playoff runs, made the EPA machine go burr, won fantasy championships, especially Saquon Barkley. That guy is not in this running back free agent class. This is a more standard running back free agent class where I guess it's led by post 30 Aaron Jones. There's Najee Harris, which, my God. I got to tell you my Najee Harris stat in a minute. I've already said it on air once, I think. But Rico Dowdle is a little bit further down the board. Would it be crazy to suggest Rico Dowdle is the best free agent running back Or is this like a real like fantasy and bio type take? Because guess what? He had 7 good fantasy games last year. So he's clearly better than Najee Harris and Aaron Jones. Do either of you feel like stumping for Rico Dowdle is the best free agent running back?
I do.
Go for it.
Please do.
I do. So all right. Not like
So I was on True Media yesterday. And
let me tell you what True Media is telling me, guys. No, actually, I looked at a different database, Pro Football Focus. So Dowdle is not like explosive by any means. Only 15% of his runs last year were of the breakaway variety. So it was one of the lowest in the league among guys who saw at least 50 carries. But he was 23rd in PFF's elusive rating out of 59 qualifying running backs. He was in line. You're going to love this. He was in line with Chuba Hubbard and Saquon Barkley. So we're looking into that metric, but
and another subscription's gone. Just keep marking them off. Soon you won't be using Google on your work laptop anymore, buddy.
Denny is not allowed to use ESPN Game Log anymore.
So, but my internet's gone. So he was, and here's what I'm getting at with like Dowdle is like a reliable kind of grinder at running back. He was stuffed at or behind the line of scrimmage on only 36% of his carries. That was the 6th lowest rate in the NFL, right around Derrick Henry. I think, he is the best because I don't think Aaron Jones has a lot left. Yeah, I think he's rotational. I know, Pat, you mentioned that in your analysis of the running back class. And then I think he's worlds better than Najee Harris. So I'm very curious to see where Dowdle lands.
Any quick thoughts on Dowdle, Kyle, or should we move on to Najee Harris?
I think it is both a fantasy and bio take, but the correct take that he is the best free agent back. I get the vibe that NFL coaches would just rather do the Aaron Jones thing again. Like, I think if you're making me guess who gets more money, someone like Najee Harris, maybe even Javonte Williams, will get more money over more years than Rico Dowdle. But I agree. I actually had like word for it, a few of Denny's stats pulled out that like, he's good at forcing missed tackles. He's good at generating yards after contact. Not elite at any of those things, but like, Pat pointed out, this is not an elite crop of impending free agents. I do think he's the best of the bunch. TBD, and honestly, I don't feel good that the NFL will agree with me.
We'll talk Najee Harris right after this. Watch the biggest names in sports talk, including Mike Florio, Dan Patrick, Dan Lebitard, Kyle Dvorchak, and Matthew Berry, as they cover the biggest moments on and off the field each weekday on the NBC Sports Now channel. It is available on Peacock and free on most streaming platforms. Learn more at NBCsports.com/now. So the Najee thing, man, he's getting rumored for like $7 million a year, $8 million a year. I saw someone say $10 million a year. And the stat, I can't remember if I've already said it on our show or not. The stat that I cannot get over is his entire rookie contract. Najee Harris never missed a game. He had 1,097 carries. 5 of them ever gained more than 30 yards. 0 of them ever gained 40 yards. Not a single breakaway run. His entire rookie contract. Like, even if you're slow, like even a fullback, if they gave him 1,097 carries, at some point they would have like a 52-yard touchdown.
Yeah,
Taysom Hill got there as a tight end on like 14 carries.
Yes. It's just totally stunning. No explosiveness whatsoever. Ever since Ben Roethlisberger retired, he doesn't catch passes anymore. Like, I mean, what are teams, Denny? Like, why would a team even do this? Like, how could anyone think he's good? Like, I know that we pile on Najee, and it probably gets tedious and tiresome, and we hate to like be so negative about someone. But how could anyone think he's good? I just honestly, it's I don't understand it. Why would you ever give Najee Harris $8 million?
I don't know. He's custom fit for the Steelers because the Steelers don't care about production and they only care about aesthetics. And so that's why everybody knew back when he was drafted that the Steelers were just simply going to draft a running back in the first round for no reason, just because he's big and they like big guys.
That was the most telegraphed pick in the history of the draft.
I was trying to think of a more telegraphed pick, and I don't even honestly think there is a particularly close number 2.
No, there's not.
Among the non-number 1 overall pick type of stuff. Yeah.
I mean, he could end up pretty easily in a backfield with 2 or 3 other options and end up not getting any run really this coming year. A team would have to be outside of its mind to tab him as their RB1. They just can't happen.
They really, the two teams I could see, I'm not advocating for this. It would not be a good move. I could see the Raiders and the Cowboys, who are just like desperate for any semblance of stability in their backfields. Even though Dallas had a good running back in Rico Dowdle. And by the way, when they committed to Rico Dowdle last year in week 12, his final 7 games, he averaged 20 carries for 97 yards. Like, I don't know. Maybe you should have done that in week 2,
right?
Instead of whatever you were doing.
Ezekiel Elliott was eating into his workload.
He was. But the Najee, it gets tiresome when one guy is always a punching bag. But he's a punching bag because it is this kind of like the definition of insanity. Like, how was this done 4 straight years?
It's shocking inefficiency. 71st out of 79 running backs in EPA per rush since the start of 2023. Like, really bet True Media, by the way. And yeah, so it is kind of dumbfounding how a team could pay him $10 million a year. I do want to say we're not rooting against Najee Harris being paid. It's just we're trying to predict, we're trying to analyze where he might go, how he might be used. So we do need to talk about him in this term. He seems like a fine young man, by the way.
He does. And again, the kind thing you could say about him, he's clearly a genuine workhorse, a guy who's probably played hurt a ton, 17 games all 4 years. That's very, very hard to do on 1,000+ carries. But it's not my money. But I mean, still, I would be efficient, Mr. Owner Man, please.
One time.
Just one time. Anyways, Najee Harris will stop piling on him. Kyle, Javonte Williams, another guy who did not have a successful rookie contract. He's only 25. He had a major injury. Could he be a potential change of scenery guy, or is it a really, really bad negative indicator for him that, a running back guru and Sean Payton, at least we believe, had 2 years and just could never figure out how to use them?
Yeah, I mean, he definitely needs a change of scenery. Who would be saying this with? Oh, it was like last year with like CJ Stroud and Bobby Sloak. It's like, I don't know if Sloak was the problem, right? But something has to be fixed here. I don't know if Javonte is the problem, or if it's Sean Payton, or if it was the offensive line, which by all accounts is good, but maybe it didn't fit with his style. I don't know what it was, right? But not enough is going to change there for something to change in his production. So I do think he needs a change of scenery. My bigger question is, will it work? I'm not awfully confident that it will. He was truly one of the most elusive and effective backs for the year and like 4 weeks, I think it was, of the first 2 years of his rookie contract. And he like broke PFF's broken tackles metric in college. And that player just has not appeared almost once over the past 2 seasons, over the past 2 years. He's 60th in yards after contact per attempt. He's 46 in missed tackles forced, a metric that he was breaking charts for. So something has to change, but maybe the thing is his body has changed, because he obviously suffered the multi-ligament knee injury 2 years ago now, or 3 years ago, whatever it was. So, and he's never been the same player since. It has not been, for 1 year, it wasn't a great situation. Last year, it kind of should have been a good situation, though. There really wasn't a strong reason. Like I said, good offensive line by all accounts, good quarterback play, good coaching, and a relatively easy backfield to take over with like UDFAs and day 3 picks as the guys that were standing in his way. Struggled to really dominate the work, especially like down the stretch. Wasn't efficient. I just struggle to find like the light at the end of the tunnel for someone who like really loved drafting Javonte for basically his entire rookie contract.
Denny, 2 other guys out there, Nick Chubb and DK Dobbins, both seemingly cooked. You really hate to say it about Nick Chubb, a guy who was the most efficient runner of a generation. Do you have anything positive to say about either of these guys where you might want to take a flyer, or no?
Not for Chubb. I do think it's over for Chubb. I also think it's over for Javonte, and I'm a big Javonte guy, as you know. To my detriment, it does feel completely over for him. I think J.K. Dobbins can be useful in a.
Let me guess. True Media said that on 5th downs.
No, I don't have any fancy stats. No fancy stats here. Just from the gut. I grinded some Dobbins film before the show. No, I do think he can be part of a backfield committee. You saw his efficiency really take a nosedive when he became, the every down guy. He was pretty good, if I remember correctly, as far as metrics go. He was pretty good as a pass catcher out of the backfield, but certainly he cannot be a guy who's seeing 20 touches in a game.
Dobbins, it really is all about he has to be part of a committee where he came out when he was fresh, weeks 1 and 2, over 100 yards both games, popped some long runs. Then when they started like leaning on him as a true every down, early down back, that is, the efficiency cratered, the production cratered. He cannot be a 15 to 20 carry guy. He needs to be a 10 to 12 carry guy. He needs to probably be part of a 3-man backfield. Where I do think, Kyle, that Dobbins could be useful. But even a 2-man backfield, I feel like it's probably too narrow for J.K. Dobbins, and he needs to be part of like a 3-man backfield. He's the guy where you have to save his bullets, and boy, his efficiency was real bad after those first 2 weeks last year.
Yeah, he was like he was breaking all of the, like, of course it's a small sample when you rush 18 to 20 times or 20 to 30 and 2 or 3 of them are 50-yard runs, the metrics all look really good, better than are going to be sustainable. But then they were like almost unsustainably bad for a month or two. But the thing is, like, you can just be bad over a long stretch of time. And then he goes on IR. You talked about him looking better when he was fresh. He goes on IR with like a month or 2 left in the season, and he comes back with like a game or 2 left in the season and actually looks like he had a little bit more juice than he did right before the moment he got put on IR. So I think that speaks to your point about he really just does need to be fresh. And part of that is that, like you said, he cannot shoulder even the bulk. He can't even be a 60% back, or you shouldn't want to use him as that. Like, if you want to grind a guy to dust and get inefficient play, by all means, they did that last year, and some teams just run it back. The Steelers have run it back with inefficient running back play for years and years and years. But for both J.K. Dobbins' good long-term outlook and for the team, it does feel like this is probably more so in the draft, but a Chargers roster that should really be investing in running back. And it's a really deep class at running back. Like, you can get a guy to pair with him in the 3rd or the 4th round and not have to pony up what is, like, last year the best running back was a good Jonathan Brooks prospect who went in the 2nd round. You can get a player probably as good in the 3rd, I'd imagine, maybe even like the late 3rd.
Yeah, Dobbins, he just needs to be in a real backfield. We have only a few minutes left for receiver, but we've already talked about DK Metcalf. We already talked about Kirk and Lockett. We've talked a lot lately about Chris Godwin and Davante Adams, so we're not going to talk about them. We're going to talk about 2 of the down board names, Denny, Amari Cooper and Stefon Diggs. You wrote about receivers. Which of these guys would you be more confident betting on a bounce-back season with? And also, is the answer neither? Or are these just 2 guys you don't want to be betting on a bounce-back?
Well, yeah. I mean, in a way, yes. If I had to go with one, I'd go with Diggs. I do think there were – I could see that that's not a fan of that one. But let me get my train of thought here. Yes, 26% target per route run last year. I know that had a lot to do with Nico Collins being out, Tank Dell being hurt or out. So, there's a grain of salt. But I think that he can be used as a short area guy if he's fully recovered from his injury going into the season. Amari Cooper, I was reading through Matthew Berry's combine takeaways, which you can find on the site. And a few people at the combine mentioned that they think Cooper might be just cooked. And so, I looking at the numbers and the drop off for Amari Cooper outside of that weird game where he was targeted like 15 times on 20 routes or something.
That was weird. That was weird.
There was no indication, that he was emerging or was even part of that Bills offense. I think that he's like a wide receiver 3 probably at this point in his career. I think Diggs can be a wide receiver 2 still.
Denny, while you were talking, I realized I would probably rather bet on a Diggs bounce back. It is hard to place that bet coming off a torn ACL, though, Kyle. I mean, do you have a strong feeling on this? Or is it kind of like a classic, like, I don't know, like I have a slight preference, but like, why are we having this debate? Why are we even talking about these 2 guys? Who do you like better as a bounce back player?
With the show nearing its time based, and you've about summed up, like, I guess, slightly strong Stefon Diggs. I will say that. Diggs at his peak is just a far, far better player than Amari Cooper. He was on pace for a good, not great year last year. He averaged like 1.8 yards per route run. I think he was on pace to just top 1,000 yards before tearing his ACL, with the big caveat being that he's the one coming off of a catastrophic knee injury, whereas Amari Cooper, also his time in Buffalo, is like, it is hard to board the train while it's board the plane while it's taking off, right? Like, middle of the season, you just get airdropped into an offense. He's not the only player who struggled in that situation. So maybe that's the sales pitch for him, that last year wasn't the true him. But if it was, as Denny pointed out, he might be cooked at this point. Whereas Diggs, if he gets a clean bill of health coming off of the ACL, which is not a given, but if he meets that condition, I still think there's a lot of ceiling for him as probably a more target dominant underneath player, like Denny said. But for my money, I would be betting on Diggs.
What I would say about Diggs is that even before the injury last year, the bounce back wasn't really happening. Like, he was useful, but like, you know, the numbers cratered in the second half of 2023 in Buffalo, and they were not like reverting to his like superstar levels before the injury last year. So it's a guy who seemed to be in clear decline. Now he's an ACL, but Amari Cooper was, I don't know, that was disconcerting.
It was. I mean, there's nobody there, and it's not like the Bills have like a dominant wide receiver one. Like, he had every opportunity, and it simply didn't happen.
The vibes
Matt
were
Collins
just
and
all
Curtis
wrong.
Samuel were playing over him. Like, that's
The vibes were so bad with Amari Cooper.
They were.
They were just not good, right? He did not even want to be around this contract anymore, and he's maybe got one eye on retirement. He's also been traded so many times. I don't know. Yeah, maybe he needs some stability, but Amari Cooper can't. I'd probably still place that bet. He's got better health.
Spoken like a true dynasty manager.
I know,
You remember
he's
those
younger.
college dominators from 2014? We're riding it with Amari Cooper again.
We are, folks. Yep. But guess what? Can't miss. I was told Amari Cooper can't miss. And, it is funny that he's had a good career still.
Yeah, he's had a very good career.
We've had a very good show. We hope you've enjoyed us previewing the free agent market. Again, Denny and I's free agency primer live on the site. Kyle's 32 free agents, the most important for every team, live on the site. Matthew Berry's combine takeaways live on the site. We're going to have so much more stuff live on the site because free agency, the blurb machine will be whirring. We're going to have reaction articles, reaction podcasts. So keep it locked to Rotoworld.com with free agency gearing up for Denny Carter. For Kyle Dvorchak, I'm Patrick Daugherty. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week.